So today I'm going to talk about Saturn in the 12th house, and I have a lot to cover. But before I do, please click that follow button. I'm trying to reach 10,000 followers so I can monetize this channel and bring more content for you guys. Now let's begin with Saturn in the 12th house. Now the 12th house is the house that is furthest away from the ascendant, and is the house that is associated to spirituality, to losses, expenses, to grief, sacrifices, sorrow. But ultimately it is associated with liberation, because it is also the house of your past lives. It is the house of endings and beginnings, where things go to die and they begin again, where a door closes and a new one opens. And now Saturn is the planet of fear, delays, challenges, struggles, of karma, and of hard work. So Saturn here feels very comfortable. In fact, Saturn is the significator of the 12th house, because the 12th house is all those losses and pain and grief, and Saturn wants you to go through pain, loss, and grief in order to come through a new realization. In fact, Saturn gives you that hope. So Saturn and the 12th house are very much tightly linked together. But whenever a planet comes into the 12th house, you lack the guidance of that planet. So you will spend too much of your energy and time assessing the traits of that planet. And Saturn is structure. Saturn is work. So it will mean that you'll spend too much of your energy and time establishing structure in life and on work and hard labor and things that you may not particularly enjoy or like, and you'll spend a lot of time doing these things that you don't enjoy and like, and because you don't have any sense and you have no guidance of it. You know, you're the type of person that believes that, oh, I must work hard, I must have this structure. And again, 12th house is loss and Saturn is fear, because you do this because you fear that one day you may lose this structure in life, that you may lose all the things that you have worked to gain. And believe me, one day you will, but that fear is like, I've got to have this in my life, I've got to work hard for it, for this, for that, we'll get into it, all the other different things, because you fear one day you may not have them. But the truth of the matter is that through the losses of these things, of these structures you have in life, it's actually going to bring you closer to the 12th house, which is divinity, God, spirituality. Now, because Saturn is work and labor, it's going to make you do jobs that are either in foreign lands or in isolated places or in uncommon places or in large institutions such as hospitals, asylums, prisons, banking, in any type of job where you are going to spend a lot of your time and energy. And like I said earlier, it's also looking also at the 6th house. So it's going to be jobs that you may not particularly enjoy, but because you lack the guidance of Saturn, you're going to work too much. You're going to feel like, if I don't do this job, even though it's hard and many hours and I don't like it, I have to do it, because I can't imagine a life where I don't have this. You know, you're living in this dream world. Your work life is a fantasy, and you're going to live in that fantasy until your Saturn return. You're going to have that fantasy of like, okay, I have this job, my life is structured, it's great, you know, but is it really, are you actually happy? And the fear of losing all these things, you can't stand it, you know, because the 12th house is the unknown, and you fear not having these things, but you don't know why. But on your Saturn return, Saturn reveals the light of the 12th house, and it shows you why you feared it, and it actually shows you that, hey, through the loss of these things, it actually brings you a new beginning in life. Not because Saturn is in the 12th house and it's not giving you any direction in life. You're going to have too much structure in life. You're going to be too disciplined. You might be too hard on yourself. So you can actually excel in jobs that require a lot of structure, in jobs that require a lot of discipline and organizational skills. where you are working a lot at your own personal expense, where you feel like, oh, I hate this job, but I don't want to leave it because I'm scared of leaving this job. Because what if I don't have a job? Then I'm not going to have this structure and foundation in my life. I'm not going to have this wealth in my life. I'm not going to have this routine in my life. Oh, what am I going to do? And you fear leaving that job, and you stick to that job until Saturn matures at the age of 36, where life can bring a very significant shift. And through this job, you're not going to feel fulfilled. You know that you're wasting your time. And by doing these jobs and having this daily routine, you're going to feel like you're wasting your time. Saturn is the father of time. He is chronological. He's the god of time. You're wasting time. 12th house is expenses, wasting. Saturn is time. You're going to waste your time in these structures of life, in your job, in your daily routines. Too much energy is being spent in these things, and you're going to find that these things eventually they're meaningless, because eventually in your Saturn return, what you're going to actually find is the 12th house, is divinity, it's spirituality, because it doesn't fulfill you. You might have the sense that you want to do something that's more fulfilling. Maybe you do want to do humanitarian work, help the minorities and so on, but you fear doing that. You fear of taking that step because you fear that by not having a traditional job, not having these traditional values and standards in life, that you're at a loss. But deep down inside, you want a very fulfilling job, and that usually involves humanitarian work. Now, the 12th house is also the house of sleep, and it's also the house where whatever planet we have in that planet manifests itself in your dreams. So perhaps when you go to sleep, you may have lessons in your dreams. There might be someone there showing you how to have structure in life, how to control and manage that structure in life, not to work too much or too little, that you find that balance. So it's important to have a diary where you can write down these important lessons that can bring insights about your fears and insecurities. Now, Saturn from the 12th house is looking at the second house of family, home, and possessions. So, and by having Saturn in the 12th house, fear of losses, it might make you fear losing your family, fear of losing money, fear of losing material possessions. So you may hold on to them because you are scared of losing them. And you may follow traditional family values that you may not agree on, but you feel that if I don't agree, or if I don't go along with my family values and traditions and standards, then I'm gonna miss something out. They may neglect me, or they might judge me. So you stick to it, even if you like it or not. You're gonna stick through these values. And again, also with the money and the possessions, the material things, you are afraid of losing them. So you might be a person that's very stingy, and you might not want to share your money. You keep it to yourself, or you may have a lack of knowing what to do with that money. You may save a lot, but also spend a lot because of the fear of missing out. It makes you focus too much on these things because you have the fear that maybe one day you will lose these things. And the reason you hold on to these things so much is because you feel that one day you may lose these things. You may not have that money. You may not have family. The second house is also the mouth and the throat. It's also your food intake. So you may have eating disorders where you may indulge too much in food. You may eat a lot. You have no control of that, or you may be too disciplined with food, because again, Saturn is that discipline. And the reason you're very much like this is because you feel that one day you may not have food, one day you may be poor, one day you may not, you may starve. So it makes a person have this eating disorders or overindulgence with food. And Saturn is also aspecting the sixth house, because it's in the 12th house. The polar axis is the sixth house of daily routine, of work, of habits, of your health. So again, you spend too much time on work. You spend too much time trying to establish this perfect structure in your life. It's basically it's delusional, and where you feel that if you don't have this routine in life, if you don't have a job, you're gonna miss out on something. You're gonna lose out on something. But again, you don't know what it is because Saturn is sitting there in the 12th house, the house of the unknown. You don't know what it is. The sixth house is also problems and conflicts. So whenever you have a problem or a conflict, you may isolate yourself because Saturn there's in the 12th house, or you may deal with them with a lot of discipline and structure, and this is a very good thing. But because of that fear, you fear that, hey, if I don't deal with this right now, I'm going to lose something bad is going to happen to me. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to face it anyway. It also makes you fear getting sick or having diseases or any chronic illnesses, and you may work too much on trying to delay these matters. And it's a very interesting thing because, especially if you're a Capricorn ascendant, you actually age like fine wine. And we're going to talk about the different ascendants, but there's definitely too much focus in this area of life. Now, the seventh house of relationships also gets affected by this because the seventh house is 8 places away from Saturn, and the 8 is transformation. So it makes a person perhaps get involved in a relationship they may not necessarily like, they may not necessarily enjoy. But again, Saturn in the 12th house is all about I have to have the structure in life because I fear that one day I may not have it. I have to follow this traditional life and standards because I may not have it one day. Is that always fear of missing out, fear of not having it? So, and with the seventh house in relationship, 8 places away from Saturn, it makes you commit to relationships, but not necessarily out of love. It's mostly out of fear. And depending on other placements, that may line up differently. So you're very committed to your relationship. Saturn also aspects the ninth house, which is the house of higher education, philosophy, expansion of the mind, higher studies. It's also your mentors, and it's also your father and your style of parenting. So here it might make you study very hard, or it might make you believe that you must have a higher degree, you must go to university, because if you don't, you're not going to have that perfect, structured life of, having a job and all these other things that we spoke about. So it makes you pursue these things, and later on in life, you find that they might be a waste. You may not work with that subject that you studied, and it also makes you kind of very committed and serious with your father, because you might fear of losing your father. Saturn is also the significator of your father, and it's sitting in the 12th house. You fear of losing your dad one day, and it's looking at the ninth house of your father as well, of your first teacher. So you fear of losing your father. So your overall approach with Saturn in the 12th house is, I have to have this perfect, structured, traditional life, and I'm going to do it whether I like it or not, because if I don't have it one day, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. There's a devotion to these traditional forms of authority, whether it be through your family values and traditions, to your teachers and mentors, to your father, to your work, to your daily routine. Now, when it comes to the whole family and your father, it's because you feel that, hey, if you don't follow their rules, they might bail out on you, and that scares you. So Saturn in the 12th house restricts peace of mind, and it restricts and delays spiritual enlightenment. Now, with Saturn in the 12th house, the house of isolation, it might make you fear being alone, and you may not know why. Maybe when you were a child, you were afraid of being alone, or maybe there were periods where you had to be alone, because Saturn makes you face your karma, it makes you face your fears, and that fear of being alone. There would definitely be periods of time where you had to spend time alone, either as a child or as an adult prior to your 30 years of age or Saturn return, where you didn't like it, you felt scared. And so there's definitely a fear of being alone. But later on in life, you learn to embrace being alone, especially after your Saturn return. And the reason you will experience these periods of isolation and loneliness is because Saturn wants you to experience and to facilitate deep introspection and spiritual pursuits. Because it is only when we are alone where we ask ourselves the bigger questions. In fact, if we look at convicts when they are in prison, that's when they usually approach spirituality or religion. That's when they usually find God, right in prison. So the 12th house is prison, and you may not be in prison, but when you're alone, you might feel that you're in prison, or your life as a whole may feel like a prison. Your work, your routine, your family, your father, all these things may feel like a prison. And then it's only when you're alone, when you finally are able to reflect and understand what it means and to seek divinity and understanding through higher meaning. So what happens in your Saturn return? And if you don't know, Saturn return happens at 30 years of age, because it takes 30 years for Saturn to go through all of the 12 houses, to go through all of that 12 zodiac signs. So if you have Saturn in the 12th house, well, it takes 2.5 years in every house. It'll go through the first, second, third, all the way around until it comes back to the 12th house, where it makes you face, finally, it makes you face your fears, and it makes you face losses. But these losses, although they may close one door, they open a new beginning into your life. And Saturn finally shines the light in the 12th house of spirituality and all the unknown things, and it makes you understand why you fear all these things prior to 30. Why do you fear losing your money? Why do you fear losing your family? Why do you fear not having structure or a job in life? Why do you fear not having an education or being close to your father? And it makes you finally see why you feared it. And it makes you see that it's actually not that bad at all. And yes, you may go through losses. You may lose your home. You may lose your job. You may lose your father. You may lose these things. But through these losses, you find spiritual enlightenment, because you've gone through all this very structured life, right? You had a job, you worked, you had a family, and it wasn't fulfilling. And then you think, okay, wait a minute, I did all of this and now I lost it. So what's the point? Why did I lose all my work and effort and time in these things? And then Saturn finally reveals it to you, because there's a bigger meaning to life, and that is spirituality. And that's when you start a whole new life, because again, the 12th house is endings and beginnings. You begin a new life. So now, yes, you might have lost your home, you might have lost your money, you might have lost your family, you might have lost your job, or you might have lost your father, or you might lose your relationship, because Saturn, 7th house, is 8 places away, so your relationship changes. So, but all of this changes for the better. Yes, there's a loss, but 12th house is loss, it's sacrifice. In order to gain something new, you must give up these things, and Saturn is fear of losing these things. And when you hit that Saturn return makes you finally face these losses that you so delayed and were afraid of. You finally face them, and then you seek spirituality. Now, it will be through grief or pain or sorrow, but you definitely now begin to apply spiritual practices in your daily lives. Saturn in 12th house is looking at the 6th house. So in Saturn return, you start to apply spiritual practices, meditation, or learn about spirituality. Or you may find someone, or a mentor, a father figure, someone who's there to give you spiritual knowledge. You suddenly acquire a sense of spirituality. You suddenly find this bigger meaning in life. You suddenly find this fulfillment that you seek for your life, and now you're no longer afraid of these things. I mean, naturally, Saturn is not, you're always going to have that sense of fear of losing these things, but now spirituality becomes a bigger part of your life. And that's what Saturn in the 12th house is fear of all these losses, fear of the structure that you have in life, and eventually you do come at a loss of all of these things, but only to make you stronger, because Saturn wants to discipline you. Saturn wants to teach you. It wants to teach you that all those things don't are not enough. They are inferior. They are inferior to the lessons that Saturn wants to teach you. And Saturn wants you to seek and approach spiritual enlightenment.